The biggest mistake a lot of us make when we try to break a pattern that is toxic to us, we never put anything to replace it. We never put anything in its place. Like, for example, you drive home, and every single time you drive home, you pass by this bakery, and that's your thing. That's your thing when you drive home. That's the thing that you do. And now every single time you drive home, unless you did something else to replace the bakery, you're going to constantly be thinking about the bakery every single time you drive home. But maybe you can say every single time you drive home, there's a particular podcast that you listen to, and that consumes your mind and your attention so much that as you're driving, you're only thinking about the words on the podcast and obviously thinking about the road. Hey, don't forget about the road. So that way, when we remove and we refill with something else, it helps to transform and rewire our brain. What if the cravings that we have are not just random? Instead, what if they're trying to communicate some kind of message to us about our emotion, our habits, or our unmet needs? But instead, what we do is we suppress them, we ignore them, try to fight them. But what if we really just need to understand them and explore them? Well, that's our goal today in this podcast. We're going to be decoding cravings, understanding the meaning and the source of them instead of fighting them. You're listening to Healthy Hypocrites. This is the podcast where we get real about health and we talk about the messy intersection between science, health, and faith. And this is the show where we encourage vulnerability from healthcare workers by answering very personal questions. I'm your host, Tumi, a dietitian and lactation consultant and a follower of Christ. And I believe that wellness is not about perfection, but instead it is about honesty, intention, and grace. And each week we'll be unpacking different topics and understanding them from a scientific, spiritual, and a health aspect so that we can live a whole life and not just a healthy life. So before we get into this topic, before we start to understand our cravings, I want us to break the ice. So let's break the ice. I'm going to bring out the confession jar. This is essentially a jar that's full of different questions on today's topic. And I'll be answering one of those questions. I'm going to be vulnerable. Okay, I'm going to practice what I preach and be vulnerable. So I'm encouraging you guys, please don't make me be vulnerable alone. If you want to answer this question, answer it out loud where you are right now to yourself. Well, that's if you're alone. And answer it in the comment section. Send me a message. Tell me what your answer is. But okay, let's pick this question, okay? Let's see what it is. On the notes of cravings. What is the food that you crave the most? Whoa. Okay. What is the food that I crave the most? This is so tricky because I feel like my cravings, I don't typically crave something that is not around me. Like, if, for example, every time I go to Alessi, which is in, I think, the south of Johannesburg.
East.
Oh, east. To the east of Johannesburg. Every time I go to Alessi, there's this Bullsong trailer that I always buy Bullsong at. But if I'm in Pretoria, I will not crave that biltong. If I'm in Centurion, there's this bagel place. And so if I'm there, I crave the bagel. But if I'm not there, I won't crave it. If I'm home, I will crave whatever I can get at the garage or whatever I can get at, whatever's close to me. But I know that actually does not answer the question. If I were to put an average on everything and say, what food do I crave the most? I would say baked goods. I'm very much a flour girl. Give me the gluten, give me the flour. So I will crave a bagel or pizza or bread, a very fresh bread, or I'm a flour girl. So that is the thing that I would crave most. Okay, so tell me what you crave the most. Don't make me feel vulnerable alone. And yeah, so let's get into it. And before we get into it, we need to make one very big distinction. Hunger and cravings are not the same thing. Okay, so let's go into the definition of what a craving is. When I looked for the definition, I went on Oxford and I was like, okay, let's see. I think Oxford will give me something juicy. And they said, the strong desire for something. And I was like, wow, is that it? The strong desire for something? But then I realized that craving is a word that is not only used for food, it's used for an emotional feeling and stuff like that. And so I found this 2020 German article that defined a craving as the intense desire to eat a particular type of food. Yes. So that is actually, I found, a much more satisfying definition. And so essentially what the article mentioned is that when we crave, it's usually high energy dense, high calorie foods that a person would crave. And then let's move on to hunger. How does it define hunger? So hunger is defined as the absence of fullness and also the feeling of an empty stomach. So hunger is more of a biological need, and a craving is more of a desire. So now, how do we differentiate between the two? So hunger can be solved by eating anything. I could, if I'm hungry, I will eat, 2 of these apples and 2 of these peppers, and I'll be okay. Then the thing is resolved. But if I have a craving, then I want something very specific, and the craving won't go away until I have that particular thing. So that is a nice way that we can differentiate between the two. And if you were to ask me today where cravings come from, how they start, what triggers cravings, I would tell you probably, if I didn't do any research on this topic, I would probably say that it's some kind of emotional eating, and has some touch of, maybe some kind of spiritual or physical emptiness. But when I did research, I found that there is so much of a broader spectrum to why we crave for things that we do. And cravings are multidimensional. It's not just like you have a craving because, you're hormonal, and every single time you have cravings, it's because of your hormones. It's actually, there's all different kinds of reasons why we crave different things. So I just want to talk about I'm just going to touch on some of the things that were mentioned in this German article that I was talking about now. By the way, any and every kind of piece of evidence that I speak about will always be in the description below, so you can always look for it there. So some reasons are due to reward-related systems, cognitive, sometimes to think about something and then we crave it, emotional, behavior, habitual, nutrient deficiency, although there's very little evidence on, let me say the evidence is not strong on if a nutrient deficiency is causing a craving. Hormonal changes are also something and also relevant. So essentially what happens is that we crave things because our body is either seeking relief or seeking reward. So that is kind of like the gist of it. So let's talk about the different kinds of cravings, right? What researchers identify as the different kind of cravings. So there's physical craving that can happen when you have had a long gap of time where you haven't eaten and then you start having cravings. Emotional craving triggered by different kinds of emotions that we're also going to be getting into in detail. Habitual, environmental, things like you see and smell. Hormonal, stress being one of the biggest ones. So essentially cravings tell a story as to what's happening with you, what's happening around you, and how those two things are communicating. And after today, we're going to be able to look at the source of the craving instead of just fighting it. Okay. So the very first and the biggest reason why we have cravings, well, not always, but the biggest for some could be, is cravings that come from emotional overload. So when life gets heavy, our brain looks for some kind of relief or from that heaviness. And so what research has found is that in situations of high stress, loneliness, anxiety, overstimulation, when we have arguments with people, when we're burned out, when we're bored, then the cravings are more likely to creep in. And science has pointed to, and not just science, but, social things that experiences that I've had, is that the cravings are usually for energy dense foods, right? And what I found interesting, to be a very nice, interesting fun fact, is that the number one craving is actually chocolate. I knew that chocolate was common. I just didn't know it was scientifically, research-wise, the number one. So it's chocolate and chocolate products, and then it's followed by sugar and refined, it's followed by energy dense or high energy sweet foods and high energy savory foods. So we have all different kinds of cravings, whether that's sugar, refined carbs, salty, creamy. And I came across a random theory, and it's very random because the more I tried to research it, I didn't find anything on it. But I do think that there might be some kind of truth to it. So if you find that you've had an experience where these cravings communicate with these particular kind of feelings that I'm about to say, please do let me know, because I want to know if there's some truth to it. But myself, in practice, I haven't necessarily made this observation because I wasn't aware of it until I, started doing research for this video. So the random theory goes that when we are angry or frustrated, we want something crunchy. When we are seeking comfort, we want something soft and creamy, like an ice cream or like a creamy pasta. When we're tired or fatigued, you want something salty, like a biltong or something. When we are seeking pleasure or war, we want something sweet. I found these quite interesting. It's not scientific based. It's more of a social thing. So please let me know if you relate. I personally cannot relate because the emotion that triggers me to sleep to sleep, what am I saying? The emotion that triggers me to eat a certain thing is not within these emotions. For me, when I found myself emotionally eating, I would find myself stress eating, which I don't know which taste or which whatever goes with that. So let me know if you relate to that. And on the note of emotional eating or emotion related cravings, because that was the main topic of the previous episode. So if you haven't watched that, please go and watch that episode. It's about emotional eating and how we can approach it from a realistic lens and also from a biblical and spiritual place. So now, touching on cravings and how they label emotions, we need to figure out, okay, now that we know that, when you get to the point where you realize that you're having a certain craving around a certain emotion, that is the first step, knowing about it. But then after that first step, what do? There's two things, right? And the very first thing is to process it first, process the emotion first, and then the second thing is to deal with the craving, right? So what does this mean? To process the emotion can either face it and feel it, or you can go through it with whatever activity or whatever task that you're doing. So essentially, you would set a timer. Let's say you set a 10-minute timer, 30-minute timer from the moment that you're feeling the craving, right? Set that timer and say, I'm taking this time to face and process this emotion. So whether it's anger, frustration, do whatever you have to do, whether you're going to pray in that moment, whether you're going to decide to feel it and work through that emotion, whether you're going to step outside and come back, do something that will allow you to process that emotion. And then when the 30-minute timer ends, right, because maybe you would have processed it within the first few minutes and then you would have been okay. By the time that 30 timer ends, then it goes, time is up. Decide, am I still craving this thing or am I not? And if you're still craving it, go ahead and have it, But if you're not, then you've successfully managed to work through that emotion and not let your emotions dictate things that you're going to eat. Okay. So we go much more into detail on this on previous episode about emotional eating, but those are just two things that I would say, try them out, see how it goes, see how you feel. Then, this is also another thing that we need to talk about. Cravings that are driven by habit and conditioning. This is a very big topic, right? Because we're creatures of habit, right? We do things in the same way, like every day, whether you notice it or not. Even if you think you do different things every day, somehow you do the same things every day, right? So there are certain cravings that go along with certain activities. Like, for example, every single time you watch TV, you have a snack. Or every single time you drive home, you have to pass by that bakery and get that croissant. Or every single time you have very long study sessions, you have a bag of sweets that give you a little bit of feel how it's worked through the studies. We all sometimes we have these patterns that are linked to food that we don't even realize are linked to food. And so we attach the food to the situation without even noticing it. It almost happens automatically. It's like we learn it somewhere or we see it somewhere and then we start doing it and then we keep doing it. And then, you keep repeating them. And what I found research-wise is that every time you repeat them, it releases and triggers this dopamine and endorphin release that gives you feelings of reward and comfort. And this is a phenomenon called cue-triggered craving. And so, again, you are not duped, okay? So we're never duped, right? We're always in a position of power. We're always in a position where we're able to take the first step to break the pattern. it's a pattern, so it can be broken. So the resolution here would be to change the cue. And the biggest mistake a lot of us make, and I've also been guilty of this sometimes, is that when we try to break a pattern that is toxic to us, we never put anything to replace it. We never put anything in its place. Like, for example, you drive home, and every single time you drive home, you pass by this bakery, and that's your thing. That's your thing when you drive home. That's the thing that you do. And now every single time you drive home, unless you did something else to replace the bakery, you're going to constantly be thinking about the bakery every single time you drive home. But maybe you can say every single time you drive home, there's a particular podcast that you listen to, and that consumes your mind and your attention so much that as you're driving, you're only thinking about the words on the podcast and obviously thinking about the road. Hey, don't forget about the road. So that way, when we remove and we refill with something else, it helps to transform and rewire our brain. So that's a very helpful thing. Replace it with a similar reward that is non-food related and interrupt the pattern, right? And also always keep an open mind. Remember, it might not give you the same satisfaction because that link in your brain has not been connected to the reward yet, right? So you removing the reward that your brain perceives as a reward, and you creating a new link that your brain still needs to get used to and eventually will perceive as a new reward. Another thing that we can do in order to break our habit, like our habitual, cravings, is reduce how convenient it is. So, for example, if every single time you work late, you decide to pass by McDonald's because McD's is nice. It's 24 hours, very convenient. And honestly speaking, there's nothing wrong with having McDonald's once in a while. But if you see that it's a toxic habit that you build up to the point where you work late and you're craving it, maybe what you can do, and I'm not saying if it's like your only choice that, let's say you have cooked food at home, or you have something, some kind of sandwich or something you can assemble at home, and you still decide, oh, I'm working late, I'm craving McDonald's, let me just quickly go and pass by it. By the way, McDonald's is great. I love McDonald's. It tastes good. So please, okay? McDonald's, if you ever want to work with me. Yeah, anyway. So if you notice that you do that, make it less convenient. Put your phone in your boot. If you're an Apple Pay baby like me, put your phone in your boot. So every single time you pass by there, you have to get out of the car, get into your boot, take out your phone, get into the store, pay, instead of making it so easy as, you drive past, you go through the drive-through, you tap to pay. Reduce the convenience of it, and that will probably help you break the habit. It might not break the habit, but it definitely may help. Okay. Now that we've spoken about two very important aspects of it, the emotional level of cravings, the habitual level of cravings, there's something else that we need to talk about, and that is cravings that happen due to having a physical imbalance. Okay. So as I touched on this earlier, there is evidence that says that when you have a certain nutrient deficiency, you might have cravings as a result of that deficiency. But the evidence is weak because when people have nutrient deficiencies, they don't necessarily crave the nutrient there. Like, for example, if you have a vitamin D deficiency, or let's say vitamin C deficiency, that's more relatable rather. But if you have a vitamin C deficiency, you don't necessarily crave oranges. So that's why the evidence around that one is quite weak. But there is a very big deficiency that has a lot of research behind it. And it really surprised me. I was so surprised. I mean, I always knew it, but it really caught me by surprise just how big the impact is. And that is sleep. Having a sleep deficiency makes a huge difference in your cravings. And I had no idea. I didn't have no idea, but I always thought, okay, just sleep enough so that, it can help balance your cravings. But I never knew how big the impact was. A 2019 interventional study published by the Nutrients Journal actually did a test, right? Where they took a group of women that had a normal BMI and consistent sleep, and they deprived them of sleep. So these are women who already had consistent patterns, and they deprived them of sleep for 2 days. And what they found is these women ended up having more hunger, more cravings, and more food reward-seeking behavior, but they also had larger fortunes as a result of the sleep deprivation. And so obviously a consequence of this long-term is weight gain. And that was only a modest sleep reduction. I don't know if they specified the amount of hours they reduced it by, but they did mention it was a modest reduction. So they didn't go as far as cutting their sleep in half, right? So these were women that were sleeping 7 to 9 hours. So they didn't just say, okay, now you can sleep for 2 hours and then do this. They made a very slight, a very modest reduction and found such huge results. And obviously this modest reduction reduced the time, and it also reduced the quality of their sleep. There was also some other results that spoke to, they were in the REM phase much less, and other aspects and ways of measuring sleep that I'm 100% not an expert in, so I don't even want to talk about those. If you want to read it, it's in the description below. But in the same study, they also referenced a study that was done on men, right? Where they were having a similar investigation. How does he control the appetite and the cravings? And so what they did there is they took these men and they made them sleep for 4 hours for 4 days and investigated how that affected them. So what they found is that these men had a higher production of the hormone ghrelin. So when you think about ghrelin, I want you to hear about grr, grr, grr. That's the sound the stomach makes. So ghrelin is the hunger hormone. And so when these men slept less for these 4 days, on a hormonal level, they were affected. So meaning that it is genuinely very scientifically backed that should you not sleep enough, you're very much more susceptible to cravings, hunger, more appetite. And then we ask the question, okay, so if that's the case, then how much must I sleep? Well, I would say, and this is what I always tell my clients, try to be better than yesterday. If you know you were sleeping for 4 hours, try sleep for 4 hours and 15 minutes. Get that down. Do that for a few weeks or a week or so. And then once you can do 4 hours and 15 minutes, go for 4 hours and 30 minutes and go and go and grow and grow and grow. But if you want to know what is the recommended level, because everybody always wants to know what is recommended, how far am I from what is recommended? I went further and I found some guidelines by the National Sleep Foundation. Guys, there's a National Sleep Foundation. I didn't know that. That's so interesting. There's an NPO just for sleep. But anyway, it's an American NPO, nonprofit organization in the States. And they published a report in 2015 that says, and I'm going to walk you through the different age groups because this is also quite interesting. Newborns need 14 to 17 hours of sleep. Infants need 12 to 15 hours of sleep, so more than half of the day. Toddlers need 11 to 14 hours of sleep. Preschoolers, 10 to 13 hours. Teenagers, 8 to 10 hours. Adults, 7 to 9 hours. I think we all kind of are aware of this range. And then the elderly, 7 to 8 hours. So the older you get, the less sleep you need. Crazy. Very interesting. Obviously, there are other physical imbalances that affect us in terms of cravings. Things like dehydration, fatigue, low iron, inconsistent meal times. And those are all the other physical aspects. So if you want me to get into that, if you want us to have an episode, a podcast specifically on that, definitely leave a comment, send me a DM, let me know, and we will have a session that speaks particularly to that. But I found it very important that we stress on sleep and how that affects our cravings. So another thing, now that we've really spoken about it, because we've really spoken about it now, we've spoken about emotional aspects, habitual aspects, physical aspects like sleep, but very big, we haven't spoken about social media because that has a major impact on cravings. Okay. So in our previous episode, when we spoke about emotional eating, we did speak about social media, right? But actually we didn't speak about the media, right? Because there's social media, the things that we see on our phones and the mukbangs and the food reviews and the restaurant reviews and the ASMRs and all of those things that make us drool at our phones and to say, oh, I want this thing. But there's also other things in the media that we haven't actually considered. There's other forms of media and communication that are reaching us, that are triggering our cravings that we might not be aware of. So these are things like, obviously, our phone, things that we see on our phone, on our feed and such things. Billboards that you pass on your way home or on your way back to work. Things like TV, the radio can have an ad about a special or a certain special on a Wednesday that could make you want and think, oh, tomorrow's Wednesday, I should go and grab the special. There's bright colors, there's messages, you deserve this. And all of these messages that we see and we hear, we don't even realize that these are things that trigger us to crave things. And in this situation, we actually have 3 options, right? Or 3 choices. There's 3 things that we must do, right? We can customize our experience, we can accept it, and we can strengthen our current conditions, right? So customizing your experience means customizing what you are exposed to, right? So meaning that we all have phones, and we all know that the ads that we see and the things that we see on our phones are based on what we look for. So hitting the not interested, and actually filling up your phone with things that other interests that you like, because everybody has some kind of other interest. Are you interested in cats? Do you like seeing cats doing silly things on the internet? Do you like monkeys doing silly things on the internet? Are you interested in cars? Are you interested in technology and tech and healthy eating and fitness and all of that? Fill it up with that stuff, with those messages, and that can be something that can influence you in a positive way. Another way that we can customize, well, that is pretty much the only way we can customize our experience. Another thing I spoke about is acceptance, right? Accepting that, oh, cool, there's a certain special on a Wednesday. I can actually have this anytime I want. I don't need to have this right now. I don't need to have it tomorrow just because it's Wednesday. How many Wednesdays do I have? I have all the Wednesdays in the world. So why do I need to get this one? So accepting it and seeing that, okay, thank you, ad. That's really cool. I'm about to go about my day. So accepting it and knowing that you have the control to do whatever you want whenever you want. So you do not need to be influenced by that thing in that moment. Easier said than done, though. Easier said than done. And I really hate to say easier said than done things, but it is easier said than done. Okay, so it is acceptance. And the last thing is to strengthen your system. So focus on the things that you do daily that help you stay in balance, right? So again, the sleep, the emotional regulation, and separating the habits that you have. And when you do all of those things, they support you in so many other ways of cravings, so that when you get the influences of the media and all of that, then that is only one battle that you have to fight. Okay. I want us to turn to Proverbs 27 verse 10 that says, the eyes of man are never satisfied. And so until we accept, what this means is that until we accept that we will always want, then we will never find peace. We are humans and we're designed to never be satisfied. When we have money, we want more. When we have reached our body goals, we want more. When we have eaten this takeaway, we want another one next week. We're beings that will always want. We're survivors. We're consumers. That's in our nature. So until we accept that and integrate it into the way that we eat and the way that we view our cravings, then we're never going to be able to conquer them. And not conquer, right? It's not a battle, it's not a fight, but we'll never be able to understand them, rather. And so we're designed, and the media and everything is designed to keep us craving and to keep us wanting. And until we accept that design for what it is, then we'll never be able to claim our power back. So there are 5 things and 5 main messages when it comes to today's video about cravings. And if you never listen to anything, this whole entire podcast, I want you to listen to these 5 things, right? These are the 5 things to take from. The first thing is that cravings are communication. So listen. Don't ignore them. Don't shut them down. Then don't fight them. Don't get pissed at them and, try and push them aside. Listen. Understand. Try to see where it came from. The second thing is anticipate your big emotions. When you see that every single time you reach a certain emotion, things get out of control, try to decide, every time I feel this way, this is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to handle it. This is how I'm going to process it. And that way, you're able to customize your life and actually put yourself in an upper hand, in a better position. Third thing, break patterns one by one. Don't try to break everything at once. choose the first pattern that you're going to break and work on it. If the first pattern you're going to break is not passing by McDonald's every single time you go home, then work on that. Let that be the thing. And when you notice that you even forgot about that pattern, that's when you add another one. The fourth thing is, and this is tough, and you know, if my boyfriend were here, he wasn't reprimanding me. The fourth goal is to fix your relationship with sleep. Okay, this is very tough. This is very, very tough. Personally, you know, for me, it's something I struggle with, but it's something I'm working on. So fix your relationship with sleep. Do it by the small increments. 15 minutes, then another 15, then another 15. Do it small, bit by bit, but do it. Then the fifth thing is customize your media exposure. We are too loose with what we allow in our vision, in our sight. We allow so many messages and so many things to come our way. But if we customize the things that come our way, we will have so much more control over what's happening with us. It's a mouthful, hey? But anyway, you've been listening to Healthy Hypocrites. This is the show where we get real about wellness and grace. And I'm Tumi. And until next time, remember that you do not need to be perfect to be at peace. You just need to be present and intentional. And I'll see you next take. Bye.